Hello and welcome to the Wagtail podcast. And today I have Charise with me. Charise.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Do you want to introduce yourself?
No, but I will. My name is Charise, aka the Existential Ginger, I guess, or the two terms / names I'm known by.
Yeah, that's a name I know you by.
Right.
So I came across you on Instagram, and it's hard to know what I was searching for or what hashtags I was searching for that made you come up on my feed, to be honest. I don't know what it was. But I'm very glad you did, because I get a lot out of your Instagram page.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that algorithm kind of has a mind of its own sometimes. So who knows how we end up on some things.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you found me too.
Yeah, I feel like it was meant to be in some way. I think I'm probably going through my own kind of I don't know what you call it, religious trauma crisis. I don't know. So I think that's probably
all of the above. Yep.
All of yeah. So for people that don't know, do you want to tell people a little bit about your Instagram first of all?
Sure. So I am an ex-Mormon. So I was born and raised in the Mormon church. I was actually married in the Mormon church. And I ended up getting divorced and leaving the Mormon church all within kind of like a 2-month period. And so that kind of led me headfirst into a full existential crisis. And that was actually 5 years ago this year, but I'm finding that it's just kind of this process of examining the narratives and the beliefs that I had in Mormonism and deconstructing them and replacing them with new ones. So that's kind of the process that led me to start the Instagram page, the Existential Ginger. And then I just kind of found this community of people who were in a similar place as me. Maybe they didn't come from Mormonism, or they didn't necessarily come from organized religion at all, but just kind of this place of like, what the heck are we doing here? Like, why are we here? What's the meaning of life? Does there have to be a meaning? And it's kind of just grown into this super rad community of all these different people from all these different walks of life. And we're all just trying to figure this shit out together.
Yeah, totally is. Maybe we'll get into it, but a bit later on. But it'd be interesting to chat with you actually about the whole kind of meaning of life and the kind of religious aspect of it. But I'm sure it'll come up, because this podcast is about wellness and kind of resilience. So I'm sure it will come up, because
Sure,
that's a theme. But first of all, do you want to tell us what kind of your definition would be of either wellness or resilience?
I mean, I feel like there's such broad terms. A former me definitely would have thought as wellness as perfection, which I don't think is the case at all. I think when I used to think of wellness, it was like, okay, you're eating nothing but like kale salad and you're getting up at 4 a.m. to work out and meditate. And, you have this 6-figure income and you're just doing everything like that the ultimate human would do. I don't think that's the case. I think that wellness is, have you heard the term like your highest self?
Yeah, well, like your best self, like
yes.
Yeah,
I don't like the term highest self. For some reason that just doesn't jive with me. So I always say my favorite self. Like I like that term so much better. So I think that wellness is being one with your favorite self. So you're doing the things, you're saying the things, you're eating the things that your favorite self would do. And if you're kind of, congruent with that favorite self, then you're moving through life in a way in which you are as well as you possibly could be.
I love that. No one said that before to me.
Oh, good.
And I love that. That's your favorite self, because we change so much, and obviously when we're young we'll do stupid things, or we learn different things as we move through life, and then we become something different and something that we want to be, perhaps our favorite self. I love that.
Yeah. And it's not this perfectionist version. It's not your perfect self or even necessarily your best self, because would my best self eat an entire bag of cookies in one sitting? Probably not. But maybe that day, that's what my favorite self needs. And like, who am I to deprive myself, my favorite self, of that need? Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's like a little bit of a paradigm shift, but it works for me.
I like that. I might steal that if that's okay.
Absolutely.
And would you like pair resilience with wellness, or do you think resilience is something different?
I think it's something different, but I think they're definitely correlated. And again, I think a former version of myself would say, oh, resilience means like you're strong and no matter what comes your way, you can tackle it. And I don't necessarily think those things are wrong. I think that absolutely can be part of being resilient. But for me, resilience has become like self-awareness, because if you're aware on a conscious and subconscious level, and you're really like honed into what's happening as it's coming at you, then you're better able to handle whatever comes your way, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing or something in between thing. Not that we need to categorize everything in our lives, right? But that's what I think of with resilience. Is it's not necessarily this like, oh, I'm strong and nothing phases me, but rather it's like I'm aware of my strengths and my weaknesses, and regardless of what I have to tackle, I'll be able to, because I know myself.
That is also a really different answer. I've never had that answer either. That kind of and I don't know why I've never thought about that before, because values is a huge thing for me. And actually, there's when you know your values, you know yourself, and then there's no reason why you literally can't handle anything, because you know yourself. And I love that.
Absolutely. Well, and I think, I don't know, resilience is a hard term for me. I'm so into semantics and word choice, and I feel like that word was used a lot in very, very like dark times of my life. People would say like, oh, you're so resilient, like you're so strong for going through this hard time of your life. And I'm like, is that a compliment? Like, are you saying, am I really carrying it well, or are you just saying that because I have no choice but to go through this shitstorm, and so that's the only word we can think of? Do you know what I mean? So I think reframing it in a way where it becomes about self-awareness, then we don't think of it as this kind of like superficial, I'm not allowed to feel as I go through these things.
Yeah, it's interesting actually how we do use that word resilience, because I was reading about it, and the origins are that there is really no research done about resilience in adults. It's
interesting.
grown from research in children, and that's a very different thing. So,
oh my gosh, yeah.
So I do find it an interesting term how we use it, and because it is, isn't it? Oh, well, you can. Yeah, is it so? Does it feel like some kind of backhanded compliment or something? I don't know.
Yeah, like it's just an expectation that you should handle things really well, no matter how hard they are. And I mean, I guess handling things well is a very subjective term, but at the same time, like if something is hard for me, I'm allowed to show emotions about how hard it is. And so for some reason that comes into conflict with the definition of what I used to think resilience is. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It does. So will you tell us a little bit about your journey to kind of wellness and resilience, or anything around that kind of area?
Oh my goodness. Well, how much time do you have?
As much time as you want.
I think so much of I call it my former life. I mean, obviously it's still my life, but I refer to when I was Mormon as my former life, because it doesn't even really feel like it's on the same plane as what I'm living right now. But in that former life, I just wasn't an authentic version of myself. I was very much devoted to the faith. I very much fully believed it and internalized it. I really bought into this idea of like living together forever in this beautiful celestial glory with my family, which is the whole goal of the Mormon church. And I was told that if I did, this list of things, then I would get this list of blessings. And so my entire life revolved around making sure I was doing this list of things, which was, being a good Mormon girl entails reading your scriptures and going to church and being a good wife and preparing myself to be a mother and all of these things, which are not necessarily bad things, but when your heart's not in them and you feel like you're being guilted into them out of fear, because the carrot that's dangled in front of you in Mormonism is eternal life with your family. So it's like, if you don't do this list of things, you're going to be separated from your family. It's terrifying. So of course you're going to go through these motions and you're going to do all these things, but it never seems enough. And it never seemed enough for me. And there's this kind of theme in religion in general, but certainly in Mormonism, of worthiness. Like, you're constantly trying to prove your worthiness to men, who in the Mormon church, it's the ecclesiastical leaders who are all men that decide whether you're worthy or not. Proving your worthiness to my husband, proving worthiness to God. And so I just constantly felt like I was like hustling for my worthiness, and it's exhausting after a while. So especially when my now ex-husband came to me, and we had a very, very rough, mutually toxic marriage. But he came to me and said, we are getting a divorce. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I was in shock, because I was told by church leaders, you need to stay with your husband. That's your duty as a wife and as a woman. And if you do, you're going to get these blessings. Again, it's like, you do this, you get this, right? And so when the word divorce came up, I was like, wait a minute. I was told that if I stay with you, everything's going to be fine. And so it called into question everything that I'd been doing. What was I, quote unquote, hustling for, if not for this? And to be a woman in the Mormon church, you really don't have a lot of power or say or authority on your own. Everything is kind of like through your husband. So it was very scary knowing, like, oh my gosh, I'm just going to be out here on my own. And what am I going to do? Because I can't get into heaven if I'm not married. And so it just, like I said, it head first into an existential crisis, but it also called into question, like, everything that I've been doing my whole life. Like, why am I doing this? What purpose is this serving to me? So that's what kind of led me to rock bottom, for lack of a better term. But rock bottom was a very dark place where I suddenly didn't have answers to any of life's questions that I felt like I had always had. Growing up in an organized religion, you kind of have those answers to those big, scary life questions. So I didn't have the answers to that anymore. I was incredibly, incredibly mentally ill, and had been for some time, but hadn't really been treating it properly. And so this all kind of culminated into just darkness and feeling like I didn't want to exist anymore, and just really feeling like I served no purpose anymore. And I don't really know what it was that turned that around, but I just decided that I wasn't going to live that way anymore. And so I picked myself somehow out of that deep, dark hole, and I haven't looked back since.
It's a really powerful thing, religion, isn't it? So I was raised as a Mormon as well, but our paths are a little bit different. So I left, I'm 40 now. I left 20 odd years ago. But it's strange. I left 20 odd years ago, and that had its own complications. You lose your whole friendship group, you lose your peer support, you lose.
It's incredible what's dependent on the religion. You don't realize until you leave and you lose it. You're very, very right.
Yeah. But it wasn't until 18 months ago, when my mum died, where I sort of had a crisis, actually, as in, okay, so she believes that she's going to a heaven that I'm not going to, because I'm not
Right.
a Mormon. And then it's like, whoa, whoa, what do you do with that? It's a really powerful thing, not having that or not sharing it with your family.
Very much so. And it's interesting because when you have it, it's such a comfort. Like you feel so comforted with loss and with grief because you're like, I know this serves a higher purpose, right? Like there's that comfort. And I wish in some ways, certainly not in all ways, but in some ways, I do wish that I could just like flip that switch and just buy into it again, because how comfortable that would be. But at the same time, comfort can be complacency, and complacency is, kind of a stagnant place, and then we don't grow and we don't evolve. So I wouldn't take it back, but it certainly is, it's terrifying not to know, and equally freeing somehow.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
But so you made a big change, didn't you? You got divorced and then you just picked up your life and moved somewhere else.
I did. Yeah, I had an opportunity to move from Utah in the United States to the East Coast over to Pennsylvania, which I had never been to before. I didn't know anyone in 1,500 miles, but I was like, I'm single, I don't have kids, and I really was looking for like a blank slate. And so it was absolutely terrifying and it was so hard, but what better way to get to know yourself all over again than literally not having anyone else to depend on.
Yeah, and like, for your mental health and your wellness, is there a difference between not being in Utah, which is obviously many Mormons? Is
Yes,
difference?
there's a huge difference because the word culture is it's a buzzword in the Mormon community right now. And Utah is very, very heavily influenced by Mormon culture. I mean, all the legislatures are Mormons. So even the laws that govern the state are fundamentally Mormon. So it's drastically different. For one thing, I still live in a very religious area of the country, mostly Christian conservatives, but it doesn't come up. It's so interesting because I felt like when I lived in Utah, you could not escape the Mormon church. It was everywhere. And like places aren't open on Sunday because Mormons don't believe in spending money on Sunday. So like local businesses don't even open because there's not enough people to come to it's stuff like that is just so woven into everyday life that it wasn't until I moved that I was like, oh my gosh, people never ask me what ward I'm in. People never, which was like such a common question in Utah. People don't even care if I go to church or not. It's just so refreshing to not have a certain religion that I don't even belong to anymore dictate the ins and outs of my life. It's so nice.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly for my mental health and my wellness, it makes all the difference because that's not in influence anymore. Because even when I was still living in Utah and I had left the church, it was like, it's hard to explain. Like you'd see ward members at the grocery store and they would like avoid you because they know you haven't been coming to church and you have a tattoo now. And so they don't want to talk to you. And it's just so, yeah, it's crazy. And I don't miss that. I don't miss having to wonder like, okay, if I go out, is this going to happen? Am I going to run into my old bishop? It's just so refreshing to not have to worry about that. And it certainly makes my anxiety not nearly as bad as it could be.
Yeah, see, I understand what you're saying because like for me, being a part of the Mormon church, you never really escape it. If your parents or family members are still Mormons,
Definitely.
you never ever escape it. And for me, I don't know, I've got to this age and I still feel like there's a judgment or like, you're being judged all the time, or something about identity. I don't know. So, and judgment on mental health and wellness is just, it's just not good, is it?
Right.
I don't know, did that improve for you? Did you even feel like, well, you're saying people were avoiding you, so you must have felt some kind of judgment in a negative way.
Oh, definitely. I mean, now being on this side of things, I've made so many friends that are like ex Jehovah's Witnesses and things. And certainly there are Mormon families that kind of cut off people that leave. I was fortunate in that my family is not that way. They still loved me and wanted to be around me, but it was awkward. And certainly there's kind of this informal shunning that happens when you leave, because it's so uncomfortable. This thing that you used to have in common with almost everybody, suddenly you don't have in common anymore. And it's like we were talking about earlier, you realize like how much your relationships were dependent on that thing that you had in common when you don't have it anymore. And then it just becomes awkward because you don't see people as often. You know, I used to see these people at church every week. I don't see them anymore. And then they don't want to talk to me because they know that I'm like an apostate now. And so it certainly has been better all around just to physically and mentally remove myself from that environment. Now, of course, I still have family and friends that are Mormon, but I've created some pretty hard and fast boundaries about discussing the Mormon church. I don't want to talk about doctrine. If my friends and family want to tell me like, oh, you know, I had to give a talk this week, or we sang in the choir, or, you know, brother and sister so-and-so moved out of the ward. Like, yeah, absolutely. A church is part of your life. I want to know about it, but we are not going to discuss doctrine. We're not going to discuss truth claims. You're not going to send me conference talks to read. Like, these are hard and fast no's. So I think you're right. I think it always is going to be a part of me. And I don't even really mind that. I mean, it was such a central part of my identity, and it's my heritage. I am a great granddaughter of Mormon pioneers, so I want to be able to embrace that to some degree, but I just don't buy into what the church teaches anymore, so there's no need to discuss it.
Yeah, and I kind of feel the same. Like, I wouldn't be who I am today without that upbringing.
Yeah.
And you know, I had a very loving family. You know, there are lots of things that come with Mormonism, isn't there? I think there's callings that bring family away. There's some the things you have to do, and it's not like, it is the teachings, isn't it? The teachings sort of, you realize, or you come to realize that they don't fit in with your own morals or values. That's what happened to me. It's like there's a mismatch here, and how do I reconcile that?
Right. I think more than that, I was treated pretty poorly after my divorce. Being a divorced woman in the Mormon church is not very fun, because you just kind of become this, oh, well, you're young enough, we can probably marry you off again, type of mentality. And it was unbelievable to me. And so there's so much abuse and harm and toxicity in the church. And then on the other hand, there is so much good, and there are great people in the church. And so it's one of those things that's hard to rectify, because we were raised in a religion with binary thinking. So things have to be either or. They can't be both, and they can't be neither, or they can't be anything in between. It has to be good or bad, right? Yeah. And so I think it's hard for us to even wrap our brains around the idea of like, oh, I can call out harm in the church, but I can also say I enjoyed my childhood as a Mormon. Both those things can be true simultaneously. But that is such a weird concept for us, because not only is that a Mormon idea, but I mean, that's kind of woven into Western culture, I think, of like this binary black and white thinking. So we have to categorize things. It's how our brains like to work. And that cognitive dissonance really sets in when we're like, wait, it doesn't have to be either or. So I think that's one thing that's really helped, certainly with my mental well-being, is just embracing duality of like, I don't have to categorize things. They don't have to be one or the other. I can embrace two things at the same time. And I don't really have to find meaning or a reason for everything, because some things just simply are.
Mm-hmm. And did your podcast kind of help you with kind of acceptance or coming to terms with leaving and everything you were experiencing? Because your podcast is brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
And I listen to it in the car with my husband. If we're going on journey, let's listen to Charise. and it's great because having left the church at a different stage, there's gaps in my knowledge that, like, so sometimes the things you talk about, I'm like, oh wow, really?
Yeah.
So I don't know, when did you start really kind of piecing all this stuff together and wanting to talk about it and express it?
Yeah, I think, okay, so I left the church in 2017. I moved away from Utah in 2018. And I would say during that whole time, I was very angry and very resentful. There was a lot of bitterness, and I was like, I don't want to see the church. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to do anything spiritual. Don't take me to a yoga class. Don't show me a tarot card. Don't quote me a scripture, like nothing. I want nothing to do with spirituality. And honestly, looking back, I kind of laugh at myself, but at the same time, I think I needed it. I think I needed to just kind of purge everything in my body of spirituality so that I could open myself up to it again. And that kind of happened a couple years ago. And that's when I was like, everybody and their dog is starting a podcast. And so I know I know in all reality that this isn't going to be like some big money-making venture or anything for me. But man, like, how fun could it be just to connect with these people that I found on social media and have conversations about our faith journeys and the crap that has, caused us to grow and evolve. And so that's kind of where that came from. And when I started my own podcast, I was still very much in an angry place with the church. And I think I'm always going to be angry to a certain extent. And I'm not going to apologize for that anger because it is valid. But at the same time, I think that through having conversations about it on the air, it helped me feel my way through it. So I'm in a much healthier place now than I was when I started.
I think it's so important to express that anger, and it's weird because I think I'm only just starting to express it. I have got a lot of anger as well, and when you think of things that happened in your childhood, like how the church is run,
Yeah.
There was a bit in my childhood where we were sitting in sacrament meeting and all the young women together, and the young women leaders were like ripping up pieces of paper telling us, oh, this is a really good talk, take notes. And on the back, when you pieced it together, they'd written about me and how I was I was straying, I was going to be taken by the
oh my gosh.
And it was like, what is this? And I don't think I really expressed anger until much later, despite how much happens. And yeah, it's that how you were treated. It's hard to come to terms with, and I think anger is valid.
It's hard to come to terms with, and I think there's also this point where I realized that I'm not going to change the culture of the church. Like, I think I kind of had this mission, and I feel like this is very natural for people that leave any organized religion, but I'm going to pick on Mormons, especially because we're taught, every member is a missionary, and it's our moral responsibility to go out and convert people to the religion. So when we leave, that mentality is still with us. We're just on the opposite side now. So we almost think it's our moral obligation to go into the church and be like, hey, come over here. It's not true. Let me show you this, and this. And the reality that I've come to is that that's really not any better. It is not my moral obligation to unconvert anyone. And quite frankly, it doesn't work anyway. So I think just reaching this place where I can say, yeah, it's a very toxic religion. And I mean, I will always call out the harm and abuse, but is it my life mission to burn the Mormon church to the ground? No, it's not. I can't possibly devote myself to that. It's too much energy, and it's too much for one person to take on. And it's not realistic that I'm going to be successful, because I'm even if all of us ex-Mormons banded together, the Mormon church is a multi-billion-dollar company. Oh, that was a Freudian slip. That was a Freudian slip. That's amazing. Yeah, anyways, what chance do we stand, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's much better to find a place where you can process the anger, but with the understanding that you're processing the anger with the end goal of you being a more well-rounded, healthier person, not of taking down the organization.
Yeah. So how do you do that? How do you maintain your wellness, keep yourself balanced and not get taken away by it?
Oh my gosh. I think it's okay to be taken away by it every once in a while. I do. But I think it's so funny because we were raised not to be selfish, right? Like being selfish is the worst possible thing you can be. But I almost think you have to be a little selfish and be like, you know what? This is about me. This isn't about the church. This is about me. And I certainly want to advocate for victims of spiritual abuse that maybe aren't as confident in speaking out or can't speak out for whatever reason. I want to be a voice to those people. But really it just comes back to how can I be the most favorite version of myself? Mm-hmm. And that's what I want to work towards.
Mm-hmm. And so does wellness for you now mean spirituality in a different way?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think wellness is, I always think of like a pie chart, like it has so many different components. Yeah. And I think spirituality is one of those components. And even if you're not quote unquote religious, you still very much are connected to the rest of the world. Therefore, I think we all are spiritual beings in one form or another. So spirituality for me has changed so much over the past couple of years, and I think it will continue to. I think it's meant to be fluid, because again, I don't ever want to reach a point again where I'm stagnant and I say, I have all the answers. I have everything I need. I have all of life's big existential conundrums figured out, because I was in that place before and I was so unhappy and I thought I had all the answers. So now it's almost like freeing to be like, I have no idea what happens when we die. Like, don't have a clue. But I think it's kind of rad if we just want to live the best life we can while we're here, because we don't know. Yeah. That's kind of become my attitude. And that's kind of the spirituality section of the pie chart for me.
Yeah. You know what? I'm going to share something that's embarrassing for me as well, but I feel strong enough to, because you know, on your Instagram, sometimes you'll share stuff that you wrote when you were back as a Mormon, and like your partner will like read.
It's painful.
And you'll be like, oh, how cringy. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I could tell. I know the stuff that I've written was exactly the same. And it is cringy where you feel like you know the answers. And I love how you kind of own that and you're like, yeah, no, that was cringy. And actually change, because I remember when I was younger, it's just so embarrassing. Some used to work in a corner shop, and a regular customer, his mum died, and I was like all blasé, oh, don't worry about it, like you'll see her again. And that's, you know, I was like 16 or something, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I think back at that and I think I can't believe you would say something like that to somebody. And it's like, well, religion made me do it in a way. But that's what I was always taught would happen. And because you don't know anything else, you're like, yeah, don't worry about it. You'll see them again.
Right. Well, and going back to, it's so comforting to us. And the intent is to comfort the other person. Mm-hmm. But going back to Western culture, we have absolutely no idea how to deal with grief. We have zero idea how to handle trauma, and especially another person. I think one of the biggest things that I've learned, and therapy was a huge help with this, is how to be empathetic, how to develop empathy for people. Because, you know, now when I have friends who have losses, whether that's like a parent passing away or something, my first instinct, is to be like, I'm so sorry for your loss, but they're in a better place. And now they're out, they don't have pain, and you'll see them again. And like all of these kind of automatic platitudes that just want to word vomit out. And I'm like, no. So now I find myself just wanting to kind of sit with them in their grief. Like even months later, telling my friend that lost her dad, it's okay. Your grief has no expiration. You are going to miss your dad forever, and you're allowed to. Yeah. And that's such a more powerful and empathetic statement than like, well, he's in a better place.
Yeah.
And maybe he is. I don't know. But like, what does saying that do for her? Nothing. Yeah. So just allowing people to be human is such a huge gift that we can give people that I think we don't automatically go to, because again, we've been programmed in kind of these like scripted things that we say when people are in pain and in grief, but they're not helpful.
They're not. And I think especially when you've got these church rules that and also you know that they're right. There's just such a sense of arrogance around it, and you don't have to think because you've been told. So all these things just come out when you're a member of the church, and it's like, I can't,
It's so hard too, because I mean, I was kind of in the process of leaving the church when my grandmother died very suddenly. And I remember being at the funeral, and she was buried in her temple clothes, as is very common in Mormonism. And I remember just like looking at her in her casket and being like, she lived her whole life believing that if she lived this way in this religion, that when she died, she would be with my grandpa again. And she would, she'd be reunited with all these loved ones that passed before her. And who am I to tell her that that's not true? So there's kind of like two sides to this coin, right? Because I do feel like we have to be better at being empathetic, but I also don't think it's our place to tell people that whatever comforts them in a time of grief is wrong. So going back to duality, it's like these two things are true at once, right? But it's very hard to rectify in my brain, because I'm just like, yeah, she thinks she's going to heaven. And maybe she is. I don't know. I can't prove otherwise. But to me, like, that's not comforting anymore. So it's just such a weird thing to like wrap your brain around. And I don't know if we ever will. I don't know that we will.
And the thing that makes me angry is my mom lived her whole life the best person. She so loyal to the church. And when she was dying, she didn't know if she was good enough. And I was like, how dare the church make someone who's lived a whole good life feel that way, I just think, there's something so very wrong with religion and grief and death and life after death and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, that makes me so sad. And it's interesting. It seems like it would be the opposite, but I am far less afraid of the concept of death now than when I was Mormon for some reason. I don't know why. But I think it's that perspective of, in Mormonism, we're taught that this whole life is kind of like one big test. And that is scary to think about, because again, you're constantly hustling for your worthiness, and your poor mom is at the end of her life and wondering like, have I made it? Have I done the things I need to do to secure my spot in heaven? And I'm sorry, but like, if that's the way it works, I need a word with God, because that is petty. Like, I just can't imagine that there's some, higher power that's like, well, your mom didn't make a casserole for her neighbor that one time when she sprained her ankle, so she's not getting into heaven. Or that one espresso that she had, how many years ago. I can't buy into that idea. I can't. And I think everybody's, with few exceptions, everyone is doing the best that they can. That's all we can do. Yeah. And so I would hope that would be enough, but it makes me so sad that people are still doubting, people that have lived good lives are just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Have I done enough good things? Yes, you have. Go
Yeah.
in peace, please. It's so sad.
Yeah, no, it is sad. But okay, so in terms of like your tips and strategies for wellness, so you've mentioned kind of therapy, and there's another thing that I see you do on Instagram Sundays. You pull out a card and you have affirmations for people. Like,
Yes,
are those two things something that's really helped you maintain a sense of being well? And
absolutely.
what else do you do?
Yeah, I can't recommend therapy enough. I mean, it just quite simply is life-saving. Certainly affirmations, and I think the way that we talk to ourselves is incredibly, incredibly important. And it takes years to rewire the way that we've learned to talk to ourselves. And I say talk to yourself because we all have conversations with ourselves in our head. If that makes me sound crazy, it's okay. I'm just going to embrace it. But I think that's probably the number one thing that has shifted for me that I'm still working on is kind of that positive self-talk. Because when you regard yourself as a human who's trying their best and learning and is allowed to make mistakes, it really does shift everything else in your life. Because if you have a goal of getting up every day and working out, and Monday goes by, you don't work out, Tuesday goes by, you don't work out, Wednesday goes by, right? We've all done this.
That's my life.
The old me would be like, you are a piece of crap. This is everybody else, that you follow on Instagram that's a size 2 somehow manages to get up at 4 a.m. and do this crap. Why can't you? But when I shift that to, you know what? You have a lot going on. And who says you need to get up and do these crazy workouts? No one. Like, take care of your body, take care of yourself, and that is more than enough. Just that like little shift in the way that we treat ourselves, like I said, it changes everything. And going along with that, it seems so stupid and unrelated, but I think the tiny little things we can do to take exquisite care of ourselves makes such a huge difference. Like the dumbest things you would think: drinking water, like eating vegetables, getting enough sleep, things like that you're like, that makes absolutely no difference. No, it does. It does. And these are just the most basic ways that we take care of ourselves. Learning how to say no. I'm a recovering people pleaser, so that has been huge for me too. It's like, I don't have to say yes to everything. I am not responsible for other people's feelings and reactions to me.
So
and
how
again,
have you done that? Because there's loads of people pleasers out there. How have you actually, what are the strategies you've used to stop the people pleasing?
All right. Well, I stole one from Brené Brown, who is my hero. She's a genius. Yeah. So she talks about this concept in one of her books where she takes a piece of paper that's 1 inch by 1 inch square, and she writes on that piece of paper everybody's opinion that matters to her. So like her husband, her sister, her kids, so on and so forth. So I literally did that. I was like, okay, whose opinions are like not end all be all. That doesn't mean that you're going to just go along with whatever they say, but like you actually care what these people think. Right. So I have a little 1 inch by 1 inch square in my wallet of names. If your name is not on that 1 inch by 1 inch square, I do not care what you think. Now, is that like an automatic thing in my brain? Of course not. There are still, believe me, like recovering fully in recovery. So when I make someone mad, even if it's completely unintentional, I still have the meltdowns. Believe me, like, oh my gosh, they hate me. What am I going to do? What can I do to make this better? Right. And we're obviously not going around being dicks to people intentionally. Right. But if someone doesn't like my Instagram post, which for some reason now on the internet, we feel the need to tell people how we really feel. And some people don't pull any punches, but I'm not going to be affected by that stupid guy that DMs me and tells me that my post is dumb, because I don't know you. You're a stranger. Why would your opinion matter to me? And I think a true sign of authenticity is when everyone doesn't like you, right? If everyone likes you, then you're perpetually people pleasing, because humans are so different from one another that there should be at least some people out there that don't like you, and that's okay.
Yeah. So do you get a lot of that on Instagram? People trolling you and saying negative stuff? And
I feel like I'm pretty fortunate. I really like the community that I built on Instagram, or I guess I didn't build it, it was already there. But the community there, I think, is really, for the most part, very positive and uplifting. And everybody kind of knows why I'm there and what I'm trying to do. Every once in a while, somebody gets lost and finds my page and feels like they need to tell me I'm doing something wrong, or just name call or demean. And I just don't pay attention to it. I normally don't even respond, which is that's hard for me. I'm very petty. I like having the last word. So to not respond is like, that's strength. But but no, for the most part, people are pretty awesome. I don't have to worry about it very much.
That's good, because it's a fairly controversial topic, the things that you talk about. So
no.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good. do you, how does it ever affect your mental state being ex-Mormon, but also being so ingrained in what the Mormon church are doing and kind of making comment on it and reporting on it? Because it's kind of like I don't know. Does it affect you being so connected but then not in it?
It's a fine line, definitely. And I certainly don't consciously keep up with everything that the Mormon church does, and I don't want to. When general conference rolls around, again, some hard and fast boundaries. Like, I don't want to hear about it. They're going to say something dumb. Let's be honest. We know it's going to happen. I don't need to sit there and nitpick every single tiny thing, because it's not healthy and it's not helpful. Mm-hmm. Certainly there are some things that I have a very strong opinion about and I'll talk about, but it comes back to self-awareness. Like, I feel in my body when things start to bog me down. And that's when I'm like, nope, I got to put my phone down. I got to step away. I'm done. Yeah. And it's hard because a lot of times people they want to talk to me about certain things. They'll say, oh, did you see this article? Or did you see this? And sometimes I just have to be honest and be like, no, I didn't see it. I'm sure it's terrible. I'm here. If you want to tell me like what you're thinking about it, I'll sit here and I will validate, how you feel about it. But at the same time, like, I'm not going to go looking for trouble when I don't need to.
Yeah. Because a massive topic right now is the LGBTQ plus community and the church's response to that. And that seems to be so heavy and so around right now with the Mormon Association, with that and what their opinions on it. And you can't help but feel anger.
Oh, definitely.
Anger. But I think you're someone that people actually look to because of your kind of page to make comment and do you feel like you need to say something about that, or like I say, be that person that advocates?
I mean, I will certainly always, again, it's that fine line. I want to call out harm. I want to call out abuse. And the Mormon church is very, very good at redefining words to fit their own agenda. And I think one of the words that they've done that for is love. And most religions have done that. So they have this way of saying like, oh, we love you. We love that you're gay. We just don't love gay things. So, that's kind of the attitude, or like, we love you. We just don't want you to marry your gay partner.
Yeah, you can be gay, but you can't do all these things.
You can't do gay things. Yeah. And so I think, calling that kind of stuff out is helpful, because I wish there would have been someone when I was Mormon, and maybe there was, maybe it just wasn't as prominent, or maybe it was anti-Mormon, so I looked the other way. But I wish that there would have been someone who could have called this stuff out in a way that wasn't demeaning of people in the Mormon faith. I think that's a mistake a lot of people make on this side of the fence, if you will, is it's not the church members' fault, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not their fault. They're kind of subscribing to these beliefs, and we've been there, right? We've been the people that are like, oh, this doesn't make sense to me, but the prophet says it, so dag nap it, like I'm gonna go with it.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to channel all anger at the head of the organization rather than the people. And I think that's where a lot of the conflict comes from, is instead of telling people like, you're dumb for believing that, why don't you just say, you know, I don't appreciate the way that the church talks about this community. And I think the best thing you can do in a lot of these situations is show people who are in the Mormon church and have this idea of not only ex-Mormons, but people in the LGBTQ plus community, show them who we really are. Because, hi, I'm pansexual. I'm not scary. I'm not like this crazy, like hypersexual being that wants to come make out with everyone. I'm actually a nice person, little quirky, albeit, but very nice person. I would love to talk to you about my pets, my house plants. Like, I'm just another human being. And I think if people see that, that's the key. I love social media for the community that's there, but we all know that it comes with kind of like this dark side too, right? It can be so toxic. And I think one of the ways that it's most toxic, and one of the ways that it's really influencing our entire world negatively right now, is that it veils our humanity. So we forget that it's a human being on the other side of the keyboard or the other side of the screen. We just focus on, you know, this one sentence they said that we're offended by and we're going to argue with. And it's just the reality that, like, these are all people. These are people like you and me, and we don't have to like them. We don't have to like what they believe, but to not treat them as humans is to do ourselves a disservice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we've got therapy, affirmations, the way we talk to ourselves.
Yes.
Being
taking care of ourselves.
Taking care of ourselves. Is there anything else that, like a tip or a strategy that you can, I mean, I don't know whether is I don't know whether kind of that growth for you and learning and uncovering and discovering and all that kind of whether that is a thing that is a strategy.
I don't know that there is. I wish that there was. I wish that there was just a how-to manual of, like, you know, how to be a well-rounded person. But I don't think there is. I think the key is to stay so open-minded and stay grounded in your values, and to have grace with yourself. I think that's really the core of it. I wish that it was, you know, a checklist. I do love a good checklist, but I think we're more complicated, nuanced beings than that. So I think as long as we are staying open and we want to continue to learn and connect, then that sense of wellness will come naturally to us. At the same time, I think you have to be careful, because I almost get stuck in this cycle of like wanting to be a perpetual self-improvement plan.
Yeah.
Like I get stuck in it very much, because I'm just like, I just want to do all the things.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be okay with where you're at too. Because there's this goalpost of wellness, and we keep moving it further and further away. Like, oh, once I do this thing, then I'll be there. Oh, once I do that thing, then I'll be there. Well, we have to be okay with ourselves right now too, you know?
Yeah, there's something about that word improvement that sometimes bothers me, because it's like, hang on, what have I got to improve? Like, yeah, why aren't I
I'm all right.
Like, I mean, maybe develop a little bit in certain areas that you've chosen.
Sure.
But what have I got to improve in? So, but again, it's I don't know, that's kind of like a church thing as well. I think perhaps that kind of
definitely
always trying to improve.
Yeah, it's never enough. You always have to do more. And I don't buy into that. I think that I always want to learn. I always want to grow as a person. I want to experience new things and talk to new people. But I have to be okay with who I am, at the core of my personhood, and know that the values are going to stay the same. How I practice them may shift and evolve over time, but the core of who we are doesn't very often change. I don't think, personally.
Yeah, I do love the idea of that, being open-minded. I think it's so important that you don't feel like you can't change your mind about something.
Oh, and it's so much easier said than done. I catch myself all the time, especially, being an American, our politics right now, let me tell you.
Oh,
well. So when someone says something that just completely contradicts my own political ideology, I'm like, no. And I immediately want to shut down. But sometimes it's okay to be like, okay, tell me why you feel that way. Or like, I'm really curious why you think that. And at the end of the conversation, I still very well may disagree. But at the same time, I've seen that person as a human again. And maybe it's given me some insight on like why people disagree so strongly with how I feel. But yeah, so much easier said than done. It's really hard.
Okay, I got one last question, which I ask everybody because I'm always curious to leave on a real high note and to really celebrate people. So, and that's to kind of choose a value or a strength or a personality trait that is really strong in you, that you're really proud of, that you use in a positive way.
Ooh, I'm pretty proud of my wit, actually. Yeah. I think it comes in handy. I think it certainly is a coping mechanism. I won't even lie about that, but it also is a very effective and positive coping mechanism. So
awesome. Thank you much. I feel like we could talk for hours actually, but we can't.
We definitely could.
We can't. So thank you very much for
it's my pleasure.
It's been really nice to speak to you.